my name's Juliet Grayson, and I'm really excited to introduce everybody to Simon Rowe. So Simon, maybe you could just say a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Juliet. I initially trained as a body psychotherapist many lifetimes ago, many years ago. And after a few years in practice, I found that, I learned vast amounts from that, but I found there was something missing for me in my own development around men and men's work and my identity as a man. The environment which I trained, as is still the case today, was very feminine, with a small f. So on my training group there, I think there were 10 women and 2 men, or maybe 3 men in total. And that was great. I mean, in a lot of ways, that was great. It's very challenging. And I learned a lot about gender. I learned a lot about the woman's perspective, and about feelings, all that kind of stuff. But yet, for me, it was difficult because it was very experiential training. And say, if I was to contact my anger, which I have plenty of, for quite a few of the women in the room, it would just be intolerable. Before I'd even done anything or spoken, they were just so frightened of an angry man. I get that. I get that, a lot of people's histories and stuff, but it was kind of confining to a degree. I looked around and looked at what I called men's work, which was around I found in those days. This is the late 1980s, and it seemed to me that all the literature I found at the time was from what I would call a very feminist perspective, and it seemed to be very full of shame about being a man, very apologetic, very, God, what terrible things we are, what terrible things we're doing and have done to women and the earth. And I felt like I had to take personal responsibility on the spot for everything, really. And I kind of thought, well, if that's the answer, then I'm afraid I'm part of the problem, because that just doesn't work for me. And so I was left with this, not knowing quite where to go, until a friend or a colleague gave me a tape by a man called Robert Bly. And I thought, oh yeah, what's this? Another Californian guy going to tell me I should eat more vegetables and tofu and stuff. And you know Robert Bly, and your viewers haven't experienced him. What you hear first, what the hell is this? No. And he talked about passion and ferocity, and I thought, wow, this is a bit more like it. And after a couple of years listening and reading, I found my way to my first men's event, a men's Rites of Passage event in Wales, in Snowdonia, which is about 25 years ago now. And what I knew one of the leaders we did the same therapy training, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And I realised at first, this is sort of like therapy, but it's something else is here as well. And there was an edge, there was a kind of a robustness or a rawness. There was a lot of profanity, a lot of quite dark humour, and a great sense of profundity, and a great sense of reverence, and a great sense of service. And I just fell in love with the work. I was converted on that spot at that point. At the same time, I was slowly starting to shift my individual practice to working with more men, seeing men coming along. It was not long before I was accepted. I asked them to join and was accepted into the leadership team of the Rites of Passage team, which was wild dance in the day. And that was great. That was a real journey in kind of, I guess, primarily in service, in exploration, in challenge, a lot of hilarity, and a real deepening. It was there I found poetry, the power of poetry spoken out loud. I'd never had anything like that in my life. And it cut through, right to the heart, right to the soul. It kind of became the new rock and roll for me. We went on, time went on. The Wild Dance, the organisation kind of disbanded in about 2003, 2004, and myself and a colleague Sebastian were kind of richly handed the tools, the ritual kind of pieces to keep the work going, keep the flame alive, which we endeavoured to do, and continue to run men's events for about another 10 years with a team of 6 of us in the leadership team. At the same time, about 15 years ago, I was invited by a man I'd met in a men's group who became a very good friend to come and see some of the work he was doing with perpetrators of domestic abuse. I thought, wow, what's that going to be like? I had no idea. I imagined a kind of a group with a circle of men going, ah, ah, and my friend colleague in the middle of the whip and a chair going, get down, or something like that. I hadn't got a clue what to expect. And I went along, and what I found was basically a room full of broken men. Men who are expressing their brokenness through violence, through abuse, through controlling behaviour. But essentially underneath that awful stuff was a very damaged, broken man. Mm. And in an oblique way, that work kind of got under my skin. I, before long, was invited to co-lead a group, then another group. Then I was invited to set up a project in Wakefield. And it kind of grew and grew and grew, really. So today, yeah, that's the kind of short story. What was great, one of the things that's great about the sort of two forms of work, back in the early days when I first joined Wild Dance, there was a kind of in-joke, not an in-joke, but a kind of slight that most of our clients or participants were Volvo driving therapists from Hammersmith or Fulham or somewhere like that. And so what we found from the domestic abuse work was that some of the men from those programs got a taste for doing deeper work, and they came along to the ritual men's events and acted as a kind of a counterbalance to the Volvo driving therapists. We had steely-eyed miner sons from Keighley, do you know? And it's become a really fertile, potent kind of brew. A lot of kind of cross-fertilization of cultures going on. So I did that for about 15 years, working with perpetrators of domestic abuse, and then basically burnt out due to the work, due to the cuts, due to working in the kind of toxic environment, due to the pressures when we're working in child protection, all that kind of stuff. And so 3.5 years ago, I was up for voluntary redundancy, and I nearly bit the person's hand off and took it. I've only just now, in the last few months, started coming back into the domestic abuse work. Partly I've been in some training and some consultancy, and most recently, and very interestingly for me, I've been working with male victims of domestic abuse. And that's been a whole, and continues to be a whole new learning curve, a vertical learning curve. And a whole different set of muscles, to kind of emotional muscles, as it were, to listen to their stories. And to give you an idea, since pre-COVID, I work on a helpline, and the helpline pre-COVID would get about 50 calls a week. Now we're getting around about 100 a day, slightly less.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's with lockdown. I mean, it's slackening. That's how graphic the jump is.
Wow. So that's 14 times as many.
Pretty much. Well, at its height, yeah. I mean, it's starting to tail off by all accounts.
Gosh, but that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. And a whole different flavour of work, really. We spent a long time as a culture in the kind of 80s and 90s, just pre that, working with domestic abuse, training police, having police officers trained, social workers trained to not be fooled by the would-be perpetrator's story that he was actually a victim. They had to concentrate on the women and the children, and that was great. That was well and good, because it was a massively unbalanced. But it seems like at the moment now, a legacy of that is a lot of the men I work with say, no one's going to believe me. No one does believe me. I'm 6'6", ex-forces. I can take care of myself. She's 3'6", and she scares shit out of me. And she can do this, and she can do that. And who the hell is going to believe me? No one. And that's the kind of, I mean, it's an anecdotal experience, but I seem to hear a lot of that from police to social workers to judges to whoever apparently are not believing these men, or a lot of these men. So it's anecdotal. I've got no hardcore evidence to back it up, but a lot of anecdotal stories.
Sure. So what sort of abuse do men suffer?
Some physical, a lot of it emotional and verbal, a lot of it to do with shaming, kind of putting down, a lot of kind of what we call coercive control, and that's very often he will say, well, before we got married, things were great, but since we've been married, she wants me to stop seeing my family. I can't go and visit my mum without her kicking off. If I'm out of the house, she starts texting me saying, where are you? If we go to have a row, Just she'll say, I'm going to call the police and they're going to take you away. They ain't going to believe you. That kind of thing. A lot of those behaviours, which we normally really associate with male perpetrators of domestic abuse historically, classic kind of isolation stuff, stalking, harassment stuff. But hearing more and more and fairly graphic and believable reports of this stuff from the men I've been working with. And there was also, we get quite a few men coming through saying, yeah, I'm a victim of domestic abuse because she made me get taken out of the house. She made it so I can't see my kids. Wow. She made the social workers gang up on me and throw me out. She got an injunction order on me. And you think, yeah, okay, need to do a little bit more work into ascertain responsibility and accountability. Because it's true, it's very often many perpetrators of domestic abuse do experience themselves as victims. Okay. When in fact, from the victim's perspective, they are not at all, but that's experience that they feel aggrieved, done wrong by, and therefore retribution is needed in some shape or form, or control is needed, or whatever.
So how easy is it on the helpline to tell, and do you need to, whether someone is more of a perpetrator than a victim?
There's a kind of a language, there's a kind of timbre, there's a kind of outrage, there's a few different things. I mean, I don't always get it right, for sure. I didn't get it right when I was working as a perpetrator worker. But there are certain things you can listen out for. And it's quite hard to, if there's a lot of minimisation in the language, if there's a lot of blaming going on, if there's a lot of kind of, it's hard to put it into exact words, but I guess with experience, you get a kind of sense of it. And as I say, for me, I can get it wrong badly.
So could you just be one of the, could you, for a moment, could you just talk like a person who's minimising and blaming might talk? Can you just kind of say the sort of things that they might say?
Well, you know, she says I go on and I shout, but I tell you, you want to hear her kick off. I mean, I might shout a little bit sometimes, and you get wound up. Of course you do. I mean, but she's always in my face. What am I supposed to do? And I try to calm her down, try and sometimes restrain her. Yeah, I never get physical, but I have to restrain her sometimes, and that does my nutting.
Yeah, great. That's beautiful. That's a really good example.
Apologies to any men I might have parodied there. It's not my intention to kind of mock. It's
No, but it's because one of the places I want to show this is to therapists, and I think it's really helpful for therapists who are not dealing in this field a lot to just get a sense of the kind of things that might come into the room and to tune their ears up to be able to listen for how much is this a perpetrator, how much is this a victim, and just to be aware of that.
Yeah, sure.
So what do you think it is that makes it hard for men to come forward and report when they are victims of abuse?
Couple of things. Well, as we know, men are notoriously, big paintbrush job here, but men are notoriously bad at presenting for any kind of support or help. It's just, it goes against the grain for so many of us. It's our bones. So there's that. But there's a second level, and in doing that, first reporting, men often report, I feel ashamed to ask for help, I feel less of a man, all that kind of stuff. We know that stuff, and it's still pretty endemic despite the work we've done. When you're talking about domestic abuse, being a survivor or a victim of domestic abuse, it's a double layer of shame, because I'm a man being terrorised by I'm a 6-foot bloke being terrorised by a 3-foot or 4-foot woman. Like I said before, I should have to sort it out. I feel less of I don't feel a man. I can't tell anybody about this. I'm being beaten up by a woman. It's a double whammy of shame, massively.
And when you're working with men with shame, kind of where do you go with that? How do you work with that when you're working with that?
First, acknowledge that what he's experiencing is real, and it's incredibly shameful, and it feels really, really bad, and it's awful. And then it gets almost kind of prosaic and say, but what a great job you're doing in coming forward. You've kind of worked with all that kind of stuff. You're experiencing. You feel horrible. You feel less than a man, and yet you've still got the guts or the strength to come forward and out and say. And you've really jumped a lot of hoops there. You've really jumped a lot of hurdles there. So we kind of get very motivational, proactive, strength-based kind of stuff. Yeah. And as you and I both know, it's such a slippery, slimy. Shame can just disappear and reappear somewhere else quite quickly, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's kind of overall cure, but it's a way of at least staunching the flow of the shame and offering something different, perhaps in terms of self-talk or his beliefs about himself.
Yeah, I think these little tips, you know, I recognize they're just little tips and they're not the kind of whole solution and going to sort it all out. But these little tips are like gold dust, you know, because they're really helpful when someone is coming across someone who's dealing with that. So thank you. So,
I mean,
go on.
I'm just going to say the reality is, for all the domestic abuse work being done, we're really mostly scratching the surface. A lot of it is CBT based, nothing wrong with CBT, but strategies. We're not really very often looking at what's really underneath that stuff in terms of, well, it's starting to change. So we're starting to recognise that there's a traumatic response. That's part of a traumatic response. Or response to trauma is to, in one way, get depressed or go down, or another way, become abusive, and it's a very political animal. So when perpetrator work was first brought onto the table, it was a feminist initiative, and it was great. But it kind of got stamped. There's one reason why men behave like they do it, and it's because of the patriarchy, because it's the ultimate expression of control over women, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of truth in that. But in the last maybe 10, 15 years, there's been a lot more work done on the trauma-based approach, trauma-informed approach, looking at attachment theory, looking at trauma theory. So, but most of the programs you're going to get on, but because it's expensive, we're going to be looking at strategies, basically coping strategies, a lot of the time.
Mm. And in your experience, do most of them have trauma in their history?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and as being men, we wouldn't recognise it as such. I mean, I'm using inverted commas here as being men.
Sure.
It becomes normalised because that's what everybody else had. That's what happened to everybody else at school. You know, my dad did this, my mum did that. Yeah, so did mine. That's the culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's great when some of the men come from the domestic abuse work into our would-be rites of passage programs and deeper stuff. We get a chance to drop down a bit, get underneath that a bit, and do some work around the trauma and the associated problems. And
I think you're also running online men's groups as well, aren't you?
Yeah, that was initially as a response to COVID. I realised when COVID broke, a lot of the emphasis was on stay apart, stay alone, and men are great at doing that anyway. I just thought, I really suddenly felt really frightened. I thought, I need something here to kind of talk to. I need other men to talk to. I'm more and more isolated. So I started the group on Zoom, and it filled in about 2 days, I think.
Wow.
Still going now. It's it's gone beyond COVID. It's got a lot deeper. And God bless Zoom. I mean, when Zoom first happened, I was like, how can you do this? But without Zoom, a lot of these groups, you know, we wouldn't be having this conversation kick off, and the group couldn't happen. And so it's been a boon. It makes it very accessible for men. It's a lot safer. They can feel a lot safer, and all sorts.
And so you talked a little bit about would-be victims, simply perpetrators trying to blame their partners for the abuse. What kind of, in your experience, what percentage is that? Or, you know, because I'm imagining that actually there are some people who fall into that category, but there are many, many men who are straightforward victims.
Yeah. It's hard to say because obviously a lot of it's down to reporting. So we understand that, for example, the male victims are only just started to be reported in any degree. It's accelerating, but it was very, very underreported for a long time. Similarly, with perpetrators of domestic abuse, it was very unregulated, unreported for a long time. So it's hard to say. A lot of men and women, but a lot of men, to primarily work with men, who are perpetrating domestic abuse, a lot won't come anywhere near any of our programs or treatment or whatever. They're absolutely not. You know, you can F off. It's nothing to do with me. It's all down to that silly. And they'll probably end up in prison and maybe do a program via probation.
Okay.
If they can commit, they can commit to it. So it's hard to say, Juliet, what percentage. I mean, it's a tough ask for a man to come and say, yeah, I've been doing this, I've been perpetrating this. And we work with minimalisation and denial and blaming the workshop. We say, you know, when we've done something we're ashamed of, which most of us have, we tend to do one of three things. We can do this, we can minimise, we can blame somebody else, and we're trying to protect ourselves. And so we say, what we're doing here, what we invite you to do is to kind of drop that. Just, and it's going to be painful, you're going to feel exposed, but that's part of the work, and we think you've got the guts to do that. And once you step out of that language, then it's a whole different quality to the kind of conversation.
Yeah, I can hear that you're really setting a frame of openness and honesty and kind of straightforwardness.
Yeah, and acknowledging that's going to be really hard.
Yes.
It's not a walk in the park. It's not a pat on the back. It's tough. It's challenging. Partly again because of our hardwired stuff as men. Partly because of the subject matter. Partly because we associate with shame, and it's different from what our dads or our mates or our brothers would do. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So how big a problem is this?
There was some work done. I mean, it's a bit dated now. In 2004. Professor Sylvia Walby, I forget where she's from, estimated, this is in 2004, the total cost per annum of domestic abuse to the country, I think 17 billion.
Wow.
That's probably a conservative estimate. So we're thinking of, you know, NHS costs, police costs, social care costs, housing, associated problems around domestic abuse, health problems, anxiety, stress. Yeah, 17, I think it was 17 billion was the estimate. That's nearly 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Gosh. And in terms of you may not know the answer to this, but in terms of the percentage of, you know, female victims of domestic abuse and male victims of domestic abuse, what's your guess, or what's the percentage?
Those sands seem to be shifting. So, I mean, you have to also understand it's a very political arena. It's a very emotive point to wield politically. Some would say it's pretty equal.
Okay.
I would say, from my experience, and I haven't got the figures, or it's an anecdote of my experience, I'd say is, as far as we understand it, a lot more women are experiencing domestic abuse, or at least reporting it, or at least reporting it. As the kind of gates open a bit more, perhaps we might see the figures shift, but I still think it's primarily, in the first instance, women suffering from domestic abuse, and a lot of men as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't be any more precise than that. Really, I just don't know.
Yeah. No, that's clear. And what kind of help is available for men? Well, for both, but your focus is on men. So
for male perpetrators, is what they have. There are programs around the country, quite often associated with the local councils or social care. Voluntary. They're around about 6 months, meeting probably 2 hours a week, and they're kind of awareness raising programs. They're kind of looking what constitutes domestic abuse, looking at the effects on children, on families, and the more, should I say, enlightened ones are starting to work with the effects on the perpetrator and his self-esteem and his beliefs about himself, his expectations of the world. So they've moved from being fairly punitive, to much more supportive.
Yeah, great.
And that's very important. I mean, in terms of the message we're giving out there to get people onto the program, to get people into counselling. A few years ago, about 5 or 6 years, one of the northeastern, I forget where it was, constabularies, I think it might have been Middlesbrough, did a campaign. And they thought about, where are men going to go? Where are men going to see this stuff? So they put it on beer mats in pubs. And it says, relax, enjoy your pint. No one here can tell you're a wife beater. We are coming to get you. What a wasted...
I've just gotten goosebumps all over.
You know, what a wasted opportunity. It just, yeah. But that was kind of part of the culture. Now it's much more like, are you doing something you really don't like doing? We can help.
Yes.
Right, we're here to help you. It might be tough, but we're here to help, not to punish, not to shame.
Yeah. So it sounds like the culture is really shifting.
It kind of is. I mean,
it's shifting.
It's like a kind of a big kind of ocean liner. It's going slowly, you know.
Yeah.
In this country, we've got an organisation called Respect, who are probably the foremost authorities on domestic abuse in the country. They're sponsored in part by the Home Office, and they run helplines for would-be perpetrators, so they can phone up and ask for help in changing. They get directed to a program or a one-to-one work, and they also run a helpline for male victims. Okay. And they are the kind of leading edge in this country of anything to do with domestic abuse.
Okay.
So you can look at their website and get a lot of information there.
Okay, so that's Respect. I'll look up the website, yeah, and put it on the end.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's, I might have it here. Yeah, respect.uk.net.
Respect.uk.net, okay. And is there any final thing that you'd just like to say to people, either who are watching this, who might be someone who is a victim or a perpetrator, or a therapist who might be working with them? Is there anything that you would say to just kind of wrap this up?
For those who are experiencing or perpetrating domestic abuse, I'd say that there's help available on both accounts. Come forward. It's hard and it's scary, but come forward. There is help. And if you go to that Respect website, you can be directed to various helplines. Similarly, for professionals, they can phone Respect or contact Respect for advice around working with either victims or perpetrators as well. Okay. So the information is out there. It's getting more and more accessible.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really appreciate your time, Simon. That's been really helpful. Bless you.
No problem. Thank you.